It was a quiet Monday morning in Ouagadougou. President Ibrahim Traoré, dressed in simple fatigues, stood at the window of his office. The city below buzzed with life, honest people, hard work, and pain buried under dignity. His advisor entered, holding an envelope. "France 24 wants you live on Thursday, prime time," he said. Traoré looked up. He didn't smile. He just said, "They won't play fair." The advisor nodded. "But the world will be watching." Traoré turned back to the window. "I'm not going for them," he said. "I'm going for the boy in the village who still thinks Africa has no voice." That same night, journalists in Paris smirked behind closed doors. They had written questions not to understand but to humiliate. His name was Marc Delroy, famous for his tough questions but infamous for his arrogance. He once made a diplomat cry, another time he called an African leader decorative. Now he sharpened his words again. This Traoré thinks he's a revolutionary. Let's see how he handles pressure. Producers handed him cue cards with twisted facts, half-truths, and provocations designed for one thing: an outburst. They wanted drama. They wanted Ibrahim to snap. Marc practiced with a sly grin. "You call yourself a liberator, but your country is still poor and insecure. Are you just good at speeches?" The team laughed. But what none of them knew was that Ibrahim had already faced worse. In silence, in the forests, in the trenches, and in the dark nights when his own people bled. It was dawn when Ibrahim boarded the modest presidential jet. No big entourage, just 2 aides, a notebook, and a heart full of names. Names of Burkinabe mothers, farmers, soldiers, and orphans. As the plane cut through the clouds toward France, he stared out the window and whispered, "Let me speak, not for myself but for them." Meanwhile, back home, whispers filled the air. "He's going into the lion's den. Why risk it?" But others remembered Sankara. They remembered dignity. They remembered silence was no longer safety. The plane landed. Cameras flashed. Marc Delroy smiled as he welcomed him. Ibrahim didn't smile back. He just said, "I hope your questions are ready." Marc replied smugly, "Oh, they are." But he forgot something. Some men break under pressure and some become the fire. The studio was cold, metallic lights, tight air, and silence sharper than a knife. 2 chairs faced each other under glaring spotlights. One red, one black. Marc Delroy sat in the red one, the host's throne. Traoré took the black. As makeup artist dabbed Marc's face, he adjusted his tie and whispered to the crew, "This won't take long. He'll either stumble or stay silent." Ibrahim didn't say a word. He only looked up once at the red chair, that smug, sparkling red chair, the same chair they used to ridicule other African leaders. But Ibrahim didn't fear chairs or lights or smirks. He had seen the eyes of widows who lost everything. He had heard children cough in forgotten hospitals. The host smiled. "We're live in 3, 2, 1. The interview had begun and so had the storm. Marc leaned forward, voice like poison. "Mr. Traoré, you speak of independence, yet accept aid from Russia. Isn't that just switching one master for another?" Pause. The audience tensed. Marc smirked, already writing tomorrow's headline in his head. Ibrahim calmly reached for a glass of water, took a slow sip, looked Marc in the eyes and replied, "The only master in Burkina Faso is the people of Burkina Faso." Silence. Then Marc chuckled sarcastically. "Come on, be honest. You're young, too young. Isn't it true you're just a soldier pretending to be a leader?" The jab stung, the words were meant to pierce. But Ibrahim didn't blink. He turned slightly to the camera and said, "They said Sankara was too young too." They laughed. Then he changed history. Gasps filled the studio. Marc's smile faded. One point Traoré. Just before the show, one of Traoré's aides had slipped a folded note into his hand. He hadn't opened it until now. As Marc fumbled for his next question, Ibrahim quietly unfolded the paper under the table. It was from a mother in northern Burkina Faso. "My son died fighting beside your men. We have no medals, no cameras, but please, if you get the chance, speak so the world knows his sacrifice was not in vain." Traoré's jaw clenched. He looked up again, this time not as a guest but as a guardian. Marc spoke louder now, desperate to regain control. "You criticize France, yet you were trained with French support. Isn't that hypocrisy?" Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. He raised the letter. This was written by a mother who buried her son defending his land. "You speak of hypocrisy, I speak of blood." The audience stirred. Marc went silent. He was now interviewing something far greater than a man, he was interviewing a legacy. The cameras zoomed in. Marc leaned forward, voice sharp as a blade. "Why does your government refuse French military help?" Is it because you're afraid of accountability? A hush fell over the room. The question wasn't just tough. It was dirty, accusatory, disrespectful. Even the crew looked up. Traoré didn't blink, but something changed in his eyes. A shadow of pain, a flash of memory. He took a breath, then said softly, 2 weeks ago we buried a 19-year-old soldier. He died in a village no French soldier had ever heard of. No camera showed up, but he died fighting for his people. So no, we are not afraid of accountability. We are embracing it alone. The studio froze. Mark shifted in his chair, unprepared for such dignity. In a small room in Ouagadougou, that soldier's mother watched the screen and began to cry. Traoré paused, then reached into his jacket. He pulled out a small photo, folded, worn, almost falling apart. He placed it gently on the table. His name was Adama Sowadogo. He joined the army at 17. He wrote to me once, said he wanted to protect his mother's farm. Mark looked away, uncomfortable. He died during an operation near Djibo. There was no funeral on TV. No journalist interviewed his family. Traoré pointed at the photo. But his life mattered. He turned again to the audience. And every time you ask me why I say no to foreign troops, remember Adama never asked anyone to fight his battles for him. The room was heavy with emotion. A cameraman wiped tears from his cheek. Even Mark had no words. Silence, real silence. No teleprompter could break it, no script could cover it. Then, slowly, someone in the studio audience began to clap. One person, then two, then the entire room rose to their feet, clapping, some crying. Mark tried to speak, but the applause drowned him out. Traoré didn't smile. He didn't even look pleased. He just lowered his eyes respectfully to the photo of Adama. Outside the studio, people watching live had started filming their own reactions. TikTok, WhatsApp, Twitter, the moment began spreading like wildfire. An elderly woman in Mali sent it to her prayer group. A student in Paris whispered, "I've never seen a leader speak like this." That day, it wasn't just a political interview. It became a moment of truth, and the world was watching. The applause faded, but the energy in the studio remained thick. Mark, now visibly uncomfortable, tried to regain control of the interview. His voice wavered as he stumbled through his next question. "But Mr. Traoré, surely you understand that without international aid, Burkina Faso could face even more difficulties in the future. How long can you stand alone?" Traoré straightened his back, his face calm but firm. "We have faced difficulties for decades, Mark. We've seen the promises, we've heard the speeches, but we have also seen the pain. So many of our people have been promised peace and prosperity, only to be forgotten in the dust. It's not about standing alone, it's about standing with the right people, the people who care." He leaned forward, locking eyes with the journalist. "I don't need foreign military boots on the ground to validate our existence. We need our people's voices, their strength, and their resolve." The room went still again, as if the air had thickened with the weight of his words. No one spoke. No one dared. Mark, trying to recover from the unexpected turn in the conversation, finally managed to ask, "But what about the critics? They say your refusal to accept foreign aid is a sign of weakness, that you're too proud to seek help when it's offered." The question hung in the air, but Traoré didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. "Pride is not what drives us, it's honor. It's dignity. For every Burkinabe who has fought, for every family who has lost someone to violence, we will not let them down. Not for anyone." The emotion in his voice was raw, and for the first time the audience felt it, truly felt it, beyond politics, beyond diplomacy. They could feel the weight of his leadership, the burden he carried. His gaze softened as he looked around the room. Leadership isn't about being above people. It's about standing beside them, even when the storm is at its worst. Outside the studio, as the cameras began to roll back, the mood was electric, but it wasn't the usual post-interview energy. It was a moment of collective reflection. People across Africa, across the world, were feeling something they hadn't expected: respect, admiration, and a renewed sense of hope. In the streets of Ouagadougou, people watched the interview on their phones, from market stalls to small shops. Every screen was alive with the footage. The sound of clapping echoed from every corner. A young mother, her son on her lap, looked at the screen and whispered to herself, "Finally, someone who speaks for us. Someone who sees us." Her son reached out and touched the screen. He didn't fully understand the politics, but he felt the power in the words, in the strength of the man who spoke. Back in the studio, Mark sat silent, his words lost in the aftermath. He had expected to trap Traoré, to corner him, but in that one moment, it was clear who had come out victorious. The interview had ended, but the world had just begun to listen. Within hours of the interview, the video had gone viral. Social media exploded with praise for Ibrahim Traoré's calm, measured response. Hashtags like #TraorClapback and #Burkina Faso Rising began trending worldwide. In Paris, New York, and even as far as Tokyo, news outlets were covering the interview, not as a political event but as a pivotal moment in modern leadership. Experts dissected his words, his poise, and his ability to rise above the hostility of the media. The world had witnessed something rare, a leader standing firm, unshaken by pressure. Back in Burkina Faso, the people felt a sense of pride they hadn't known in years, a sense of validation. The world saw their president not as an outcast or a struggling leader but as a beacon of strength and integrity. It wasn't about politics anymore, it was about dignity. Traoré had shown that even in the face of adversity, his leadership was unwavering. His calmness wasn't a weakness, it was his greatest weapon. The interview wasn't just about the questions Mark had asked, it was about the battle of ideas, values, and what kind of future Burkina Faso was striving for. Traoré had successfully turned a hostile setting into a platform for his vision of a self-sufficient, resilient nation. The next day, political analysts across the world were comparing his leadership to that of other world leaders, likening his finesse and raw honesty to the likes of Nelson Mandela. Some even called it a defining moment for African leadership in the modern age. But for Traoré, the reaction was secondary. What mattered to him were the people of Burkina Faso, their courage, their pain, their strength. Every word he spoke that day was for them. As he sat in his office reflecting on the interview, he knew that it wasn't about winning battles in media or politics. It was about winning the hearts of his people, ensuring that they saw themselves in him. As the days passed, national pride grew. People on the streets of Ouagadougou now spoke about their president with new reverence. They were no longer just citizens of a country, they were part of a movement led by a man who had dared to dream differently. Days turned into weeks, but the impact of that interview never faded. The narrative had shifted not just for Traoré but for Burkina Faso itself. International aid organizations, once critical of the government's stance, began rethinking their approach. They now recognized that change was possible without dependency. Burkina Faso, under Traoré's leadership, was charting its own course. Back in the studio, Mark had received backlash. His reputation took a hit as clips of the interview spread, showing his discomfort as he was outmatched by Traoré's calm, unapologetic answers. The audience had been enthralled by the president's integrity, not just his political acumen. But the true triumph was how the world began to see Burkina Faso. The narrative shifted from a nation in turmoil to one in transformation. Leaders worldwide started to take notice, with some even reaching out to Traoré, eager to learn from his resilience and leadership style. In the hearts of the Burkinabe people, Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just a leader. He was a symbol of their collective will to overcome, to stand tall, and to never back down. A few weeks after the interview, Ibrahim Traoré received an unexpected visitor in his office. It was Mark, the journalist who had tried to trap him during that fateful interview. He entered the room with a mixture of humility and hesitation. For the first time, the smugness that once characterized his persona was gone. "I owe you an apology," Mark began, taking a seat across from the president. "I thought I could undermine you, embarrass you in front of the world. But after seeing the response, after witnessing the change in how people view you, I realized I was wrong." Traoré remained composed, nodding slowly. "It wasn't about me, Mark. It was about the people of Burkina Faso. It was about giving them a voice they deserve to have on the world stage." Mark looked down for a moment, processing Traoré's words. He knew the impact of the interview was deeper than just a political argument. It had sparked something profound in the hearts of the people. For the first time, Mark understood the true essence of leadership. He'd come to apologize, but in that moment he realized he'd also learned something valuable: humility, honesty, and courage. The political landscape of Burkina Faso began to shift dramatically. Encouraged by Traoré's leadership, citizens from all corners of the country rallied behind him. They weren't just following a leader, they were embracing a shared vision of self-sufficiency, dignity, and national pride. The country began to see small but significant changes. Schools, hospitals, and infrastructure began improving as the government focused on long-term, sustainable growth. Traoré's stance in the media transformed him into an icon, not just in Burkina Faso but across Africa. His message resonated deeply. It wasn't about bowing to external pressures or conforming to foreign expectations. It was about charting a path that was authentic and self-determined. The world was now watching Burkina Faso with new eyes. Many international organizations, once skeptical of his government, started offering support, recognizing that true progress comes from within a nation's own aspirations. But Traoré was no longer focused on external validation. His mission was clear: to lead Burkina Faso to prosperity built by its own hands, with integrity, respect, and resilience. Months passed, and the world continued to celebrate the moment that Ibrahim Traoré had flipped the script during that fateful interview. The footage of his calm response and brilliant retort had become a symbol of strength for millions. It wasn't just a clapback, it was a statement, one that spoke to the unwavering resolve of a nation ready to redefine its place in the world. Burkina Faso had come through a period of difficulty, but the spirit of its people had remained unbroken. Now, thanks to Traoré's leadership, that spirit was beginning to shape a new future. One evening, as Traoré looked out from his office overlooking the city, he could see the vibrant energy of the streets below. People were hopeful, they believed in their future again. The interview that had once been a hostile setting had turned into a defining moment of leadership and dignity, a moment that forever changed the course of history for a nation and its people. Ibrahim Traoré had not only survived the interview, he had reshaped the narrative. As the story of Traoré's remarkable comeback spread across the world, people from all walks of life were inspired. His calm intellect, his commitment to the truth, and his unwavering presence in front of a hostile media left a lasting mark. This was a moment that could never be erased, a moment that solidified Ibrahim Traoré's legacy as one of the greatest leaders of his time.